if you look at this crankbait here, that is a Berkeley dredger. It is also a very similar action, just a good moderate action. Whereas this top right one, that is a Rapala DT series. Now you got the DT16 and then the DT20. Here's a DT20, I think that's about the deepest that they make. It's a balsa crankbait and it's a little bit more narrow than a lot of them. You can see how much more narrow this is than a Strike King, a lot more narrow. That's gonna be a lot tighter wobble. So when the fish are pretty pressured, that tighter wobble might be a lot better choice than a little bit wider wobble. And then besides that, you got a Zuma Z-Boss 20, and that's got a unique action of its own. They also make a Z-Boss 25. That crankbait there, the way it works, it digs down, and then when you hit the bottom, it slides. So it's good maybe for pressured fish as well. Now, if you're fishing brush or a lot of stumps or a hangy area, it might not be the best choice because the way it slides. And then at the bottom right here, you got my favorite, and that is a hardcore 7+ or a 5+ crankbait. This one here, it's got a lot longer bill. I'll compare it to the Strike King version. It's got a lot longer bill than the Strike King. They're both about the same body profile. This is the Strike King 10XD, but the bill's a lot longer. And what that means, it's going to deflect cover a lot better, and it's going to have a very wide, erratic action. And that's really what I'm looking for usually when I'm cranking. Usually when I'm cranking, it's not a finesse technique. Usually it's, hey, I'm coming through there as fast as I possibly can. They either need to bite it or get out of the way. So I think you just, kind of weigh in all the options. That's usually the first one I'm going to pick up 90% of the time. Now, if the fish are getting more pressured, the DT series can be really good. The Zuma series can be really good. And then like the Strike King, the Berkeley dredger, are both just good all around deep crankbaits. So we talked about color. There's a million colors out there. There's only 4 colors you need deep cranking. You need chartreuse and blue. For those Tennessee River hammers, we call that light bulb. You need citrus, which is the one right below it. Then you need like a natural green gizzard, like a green gizzard pattern. And then you need just kind of a natural in between. This is the blue sexy shad color from Hardcore. Probably my favorite color of all time because it's kind of a good mix between a natural and kind of a bright color with that chartreuse strip through it. But when do I throw which one? So your bright colors, the citrus, the chartreuse and blue, when the fish first get deep. So when they're done spawning, they first get to the ledges, that's when I'm picking up the bright color. Those fish haven't been pressured a whole lot, which brings me to my next point is unpressured fish. And it just seems like when they first get out there, those really bright colors seem to work really well. One thing too, where we're throwing these deep cranks, the water, is usually 15 to 30 foot deep, and there's not going to be near as much light penetration down there. So a lot of times a bright crankbait is going to be your best choice. Same deal, low light conditions. If it's cloudy, a lot of times I'm going to go with the brighter color compared to if it's sunny. I remember I was fishing, me and a buddy were out last year fishing a ledge out in Chickamauga, and I was throwing a natural color and I could not get bit. It was real cloudy that morning, and he was throwing that citrus color right there, and he put 28 pounds in the boat in like 4 casts. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then it was just, the same crankbait, but he was throwing a lot brighter color. I feel like they could see it a lot better. And that was the deal that day. If the water's stained, we're gonna go with brighter colors. They're gonna show up better in stained water. And a lot of times what I'll do as well, if I pull it to a school and I'm catching them on those bright colors and they kind of shut off, then I'll transition to the more natural colors. That's just something I've kind of done over the years. It seems to work. Then I choose natural as we get later in the summer, as the fish have been beat up a lot. It also seems like as you get into late June, July, August, the water seems to clean up a lot of times. Now it does depend on rainfall and all that stuff. But it seems like as you get later in the year, the natural colors really seem to work better if the fish have been really pressured, which I think kind of all ties together there. As they get more and more pressured, I feel like the natural colors definitely work better. The super bright sunny days, natural colors are better. And then super clear water. Super clear water that's just going to look more realistic. And that's usually when I go with the more natural colors as well.
What do you call them, super clear?
Super clear would be like Smith Lake, somewhere like that, just the average. Now, Guntersville and Chickamauga both, if you hadn't had rain in a few weeks, they'll get pretty clean. But somewhere like Smith Lake is, just thinking about that watercolor, what it normally is what I would consider super clear. So rod. The rod you use is very, very important when it comes to deep cranking, because these baits will absolutely wear you out. I mean, this is a 2 to 3 ounce bait. The bigger, 22 plus foot diver ones are. Now, as you get to the smaller ones, your 15 to 20 foot divers, they don't weigh near as much, 3/4 of an ounce, something like that. But you need a rod that allows you to fish this bait all day and not wear you out as bad as, a different rod. So the first thing we look for is the length. You want a rod that is long enough that you can make a long cast and that it won't wear you out bad. So a 710 to an 8-foot rod is my go-to. 710 is the one I use, but if you want to use an 8 or an 8.2 or something like that, I would not blame you one bit. And the reason is, when you're throwing this thing, it's not like you're forcing it out there. You're really lobbing it out there, more or less. You're letting the whole your whole action, or your whole body movement of a cast, you're using all of that to cast. You're letting that crankbait go behind your head, and you're almost over exaggerating the casting motion. That's going to help you get it a lot further out there. That long rod allows you to make a lot longer cast. And then in the same regard, when you're fighting those fish with these big crankbaits, you're going to want to hook them, and just that long rod is going to help a lot absorb that fish fighting. Treble hook baits and fish, fish love to get off when it comes to treble hook baits. And that longer rod will definitely help with that. And then as we talk about the composite of the rod, you have graphite or glass. I'm an all glass rod. I want a rod that's very parabolic, that's going to bend, a lot of the way through the rod, at least, halfway up. I want it to be pretty parabolic. And the reason is that crankbait, one, there's a lot of fight against you. You want that tip to absorb that fight. You don't want it to shake all the way down the rod and into your wrist. You want the tip to absorb all that. And then when you're fighting the fish and they come up to jump, it's going to help a lot having a rod that absorbs that, that jump. So that's what I like. And then as far as the action goes, a glass rod, you got to think a glass rod is going to be a lot more limber than a graphite rod. It's just the way glass is. If I'm throwing a smaller 15 to 20 foot diving deep crankbait, I'm going to throw like a medium heavy usually. Now it's going to depend on the brand. I use a Witch Doctor tackle. This is the Kahuna series. This is an awesome glass rod. Now if I'm using a bigger, like these 22 to 30 foot divers, in that case scenario, I'm going to use a heavy action. It just allows you to kind of load up on that cast a lot better. And then butt length. You want to use a rod where the butt's long enough to go under your armpit. Some rods, their butts are pretty short. And if it's out there in front of you, you're just kind of wearing yourself out. So when I throw it out there and I'm reeling it in, I always put that butt under my armpit, and it'll help a lot when it comes to wear and tear in your body throughout the day. And then reel. So one of the things you need when you're buying a reel, you need a reel with a big spool that'll hold a lot of line. So if I'm looking at a reel, I want a reel that'll hold usually at least 180 foot of line.